Hi everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. This is super exciting. This doesn't happen often, but I got something that nobody else has got right now. This is so cool. Maybelline's PR company reached out to me and said, we've got a new Maybelline palette with 12 colors in it coming out this summer, and we want to know if you want to be the first to review it. And I said, yes please, I would love that opportunity, thank you so much. A couple of reasons why I'm interested. First off, if I ran across this in the drugstore, I would pick it up in a heartbeat because it's just right along the lines of the types of things I like to review. It combines drugstore and palettes, which is always cool. And I feel like these major drugstore brands like Maybelline, L'Oreal, Revlon, they never put out large palettes. So it's gonna come out June or July. You know how stores always, some are ahead, some are a little behind, but keep an eye out for it, and it's gonna sell for $11.99. So I'm gonna review it. I'm gonna show you several different looks that I've done with it in the time that I've had it, and also do an actual tutorial on one of those. First off, packaging wise, very sleek. Nothing overdone with this. It's not huge and bulky. I love that. It's about the size, maybe just a teeny bit wider than my iPhone. It does not have a mirror in it. Would have loved to have seen a mirror in a palette like this. Beyond the shadows, you are getting a sponge tip applicator. A lot of people like to just toss the sponge tips. I've always been one to try to use them in some capacity. Especially cool though, this really narrow side is actually really nice for smudging. If you like to smudge out eyeliner or something, it's kind of a handy tool to keep around. For the shadows, you're getting 12. And here's what makes this palette kind of interesting. It's all mapped out on the back here, but you can divide these 12 up into quads, trios, and duos. It's all about the way they're placed in this palette that kind of gives you ideas on where to go with them and how to use them. I know some people would look at a palette like this and maybe have an instant plan of how they're going to use that. As I know from a lot of the questions I get, a lot of people who buy palettes want some direction with them. So what you're getting here, this is a quad, this is a quad, and this is a quad. When you look at it that way, can't you totally see that? Here's like your, your cool browns, here's your more bronzy neutrals, and here's your smoky set. And then they furthermore said these could be trios as well. So here, 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 and here. And then they could also be duos. So look at them 2 at a time, 2 by 2. As far as the concept of this palette, I think that's great. I love that you're getting, the creativity, the options that we want with palettes, but at the same time, you've got a little direction if that's what you want. The practical part of my brain likes the thought that there's some rhyme or reason to the way these are placed there, and it's just a well thought out concept. So how effective are they from that standpoint of, say, just using part as a quad or just breaking them down into duos? For quads, I think they're great because you are getting some truly nice deep shades in each of those quads, some mid-tone shades, some mattes. I mean, there's good variety in finishes and colors. In terms of trios, I can see it working. It's a little bit more of a stretch because you are kind of crossing out of the designated sort of color groupings. So you use these 3 together and these 3. And it's like, yeah, I can see it working, but maybe not being as pretty as if you integrated the full quad. But for duos, I think this is fabulous. When you look at each of these paired together, the more contrast you have between shades, I think the more dramatic your duo shadow look will be, but some of them are more natural, and it's totally sandwich method all the way. I'll link to that video, but it's like, you put one shade on your lid, you put your deeper shade in your crease, and then you continue to blend out and or highlight with the lighter of the 2 shades. And it works so well. But how good is the quality of the shadows actually? If you're familiar with Maybelline shadows, I'll give you a little frame of reference. They have the Expert Wear quads. They also have the Eye Studio quads. I think these are 2 distinctly different textures. Here you tend to have some matte mixed in with some shimmer. These are like velvety plush, always shimmery eyeshadows, and I would say the shadows in this palette are much more along the lines of these kinds of shadows. And I find it to be a little hit and miss with the pigmentation. The biggest critique I would have on it would be the lighter shades. The lighter shades will work beautifully for the light sheer sheer type of highlight that I want, but I find that they're a little bit challenging to build up to a color that looks, you know, that intense on your eye. Even with a primer, I mean, the primer helps, but it takes a little more packing on with this shade, this shade, this shade, and this one. That being said about the light shades, I do think the balance of light, medium, and dark tones in this palette is really good. I think you're getting, you know, your dark matte brown and black, you're getting deeper shimmery shades, mid-tone shimmery shades, mid-tone mattes that make your blending a little bit more easy. So I think that's very well put together in that respect, and the balance of matte and shimmer is good. Your matte shades in here are these two. So this matte cream, this matte dark brown, the matte black, and then two mattes up here, kind of like a grayish taupe, and then a little bit deeper gray. So now that you're keeping all those things in mind, and take a look at the swatches, first off, no primer. Some are absolutely creamy and wonderful. Some, like I said, the lighter shades, a little more powdery, a little more work to build up. Now, the next picture is with a primer. Specifically, I've got the Milani eyeshadow primer underneath this, and every shade pops a little more with that. Some shades that needed the help popped a lot more with that underneath. So I would totally recommend some sort of eyeshadow primer if that's not something you use all the time. There are some really, really standout textures in this palette as well though. For example, like these shimmery browns, they feel like creamy, pigmented. I don't get fallout when I put my brush into them. I mean, I couldn't ask for more with those shades. Even like a light matte shade like this, it has a really nice silky smooth texture to it when you put your finger into it, and also, again, not a lot of flaky fallout business. Some of my favorite eyeshadows from the drugstore are Wet n Wild. I love how incredibly intense they can be. I mean, they're just some of the most pigmented shadows out there and extremely comparable to high-end stuff. You know, I could get a similar look with a Wet n Wild palette that I could get with a Lorac palette. You know, they've got that really buttery smooth consistency, but the one fault you could find with those is that maybe if you're a beginner with eyeshadows, or you just don't like having to use a super duper light touch with everything, they can be a little hard to control. And with this, while, you know, I can complain about a couple of the light shades not being as pigmented as I'd like, at the same time, none of these shades give me a lot of, you know, kicking up a lot of dust or a lot of fallout or anything of that nature. So with the exception of the couple I've mentioned, I think very, very impressive textures on these shadows, from the mattes to the shimmers. One thing about the black, you know, that looks black as night here in the pan. That is not like a pitch black shade. Just so you know, it comes off more of like a deep charcoal color. I do want to talk about several of the different looks that I've done with this. First one, this was a little more dramatic look, and I went with this more dramatic quad, but then I also pulled in this bronzy shade to do a little bit of the blending and kind of soften it and make it a little more earthy, you know, on the edges of the look. And I really was happy with the way that turned out. I found I was able to build up the black to my desired intensity. And so that's kind of an example of how you have the freedom to, you know, focus on one quad, but then pull in something else. And then the next day I just wanted a quick look, so I went for these two and chose to just use them as a duo. This is a satin finish taupe shade, and then you've got a matte brown. They worked beautifully together. I put the taupe shade all over my lid. I put the brown in the crease. You can also use that as a little bit of maybe some smudgy liner down beneath. And then, you know, blend out the edge of that brown with the taupe again. It's that sandwich method that works so well, so easily. And then today I used yet another part of that palette, so here's that mini tutorial. Alright, so the quad of shadows that I'm focusing on, so to speak, within this palette is the centermost part. So here we've got some kind of bronzy golden shades, and I've already applied a primer all over my lid, and I'm going to go to this matte cream shade here, and I'm just going to take that right around my innermost corner. Next, I'm going to take the golden shade. This is a very light gold. It doesn't come off with quite as much like golden intensity or really looking like a metallic color as I would have expected. It's like a very sheer wash of a little bit of golden shimmer is what this amounts to. So I'm going to build that color up as much as I can and apply that all over my lid. Then I'm going to take this pretty deep shimmery brown. I'm applying a little bit of this on the outside part of my lid. I always like to go a little bit on the outer part of the lid because I feel like it just kind of flows nicely into the crease when I've got like a little bit of lead in there. And then with that same shade but a smaller detailed brush, I'm getting that shadow placed exactly where I want it, building it outward just a little bit, kind of thinking about roughly pointing the edge of that shadow kind of going back toward the tip of my eyebrow. And then this brush is just bare, but a little more fluffy brush is what I'm using to just buff over the edge of that, soften that darker color out a little bit. Next I want to bring in this pretty bronzy shade, just applying that right over the border of the deeper brown, and so it kind of fades up in a pretty way, I think. And then for a highlight, going back to the matte white and a fluffy brush just under the eyebrow, and this is what's giving us a really nice finished look to the different shades we've been layering out there. On my lower lash line, I'm just going to use an angled brush with this shade, and I'm applying that right here on the outermost corner, and you can see how deep that can really come off when you're using a really like concentrated brush like this, a very precise brush. And then with this smudger brush, I'm going to go to the gold and just apply this all across my lower lash line here. Going to kind of overlap the brown and give ourselves a little light down there. And then I'm just gonna finish this look with a little bit of nude liner in the waterline, some liquid liner on the upper lash line, and some mascara. So just wanted to throw in a little mini tutorial there to show you some of these shadows in action. But all in all, I'm impressed with the nudes, I must say. Maybe you've been skipping, you know, the naked palettes and various other high-end palettes because of their cost. And now I think it's really cool that there's something available at the drugstore level, you know, $12 is not ridiculous by any means, and you're getting great variety, not only in neutral shades, but also finishes. The textures of these shadows are definitely more hit than miss, if that makes sense. I think some of these mattes are going to totally impress you when you get your hands on it. And then, as I said, some of the light shades, a little more sheer in their application. Sometimes that's what you want. That's pretty much always what I want when I highlight with a shadow, but if I'm going to pack it on, I have to go to a little more effort to get the fullness of color that I'm after. If you're saying, I'm up to my ears in neutral eyeshadow palettes, I don't need another one, then that's cool, skip it. But if you want, I think, a really cost-effective way to get a great variety of neutral looks, plus some good direction on how to use every shade in a really simplified way, then this might be right up your alley. So thank you to Maybelline and Maybelline's PR for letting me have an exclusive sneak peek at this. I really appreciate it. I hope the review was helpful to everybody there and all of my viewers, of course, as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.